Growing up in a home where your needs were secondary to a parent's unpredictable moods taught you that your survival depended on being a mirror, reflecting back exactly what they needed to see to stay calm. You learned early on that saying no was not just a choice, but a dangerous act of defiance that could shatter the fragile peace of your household, leaving you to wonder why your own boundaries felt like a personal attack on the people you loved most. This deep-seated fear of causing disappointment has followed you into adulthood, making every simple refusal feel like a heavy weight of guilt that whispers you are being cruel when you are actually just being human. Today we are going to explore why your kindness feels like a burden and how you can finally begin to untangle your worth from your constant availability to others. The origin of this pain often lies in a childhood where the emotional climate was dictated by a parent who could not hold space for any perspective other than their own, leaving you to navigate a world where your feelings were treated as inconveniences. You might remember the way the air would change in the room when you expressed a different opinion, a subtle shift that signaled you had failed in your primary job of keeping the peace and maintaining the parent's emotional equilibrium. In those moments, you learned to internalize the responsibility for their happiness, becoming a tiny emotional caretaker who believed that if you just worked hard enough, you could finally fix the brokenness in your home. This constant pressure to perform created a deep sense of emotional instability, because your safety was tied to things you could not truly control, such as a parent's fleeting mood or their hidden resentments. You started to believe that your only value came from what you could provide or how well you could soothe the adults around you, effectively erasing your own childhood in the process. This heavy mantle of responsibility was never yours to carry, yet it became the foundation of your identity, making the very idea of a personal boundary feel like an act of profound betrayal against those you were meant to serve. As you grew, this dynamic solidified into a complete inversion of roles where you became the parent to your own parent, a process known as parentification that forced you to grow up much too fast. You became an expert at reading the subtle cues in the environment, noticed the tightening of a jaw or the sharpness of a sigh, and instinctively adjusting your behavior to prevent an emotional explosion. Your childhood was not a time of play and exploration, but a high-stakes mission to stabilize a family system that was perpetually on the brink of collapse, leaving you with a nervous system that is still stuck in high alert. By becoming the stabilizer, you learned to suppress your own natural impulses and desires because there was simply no room for them in a house dominated by a narcissistic presence. You felt that if you took up any space at all, you were taking something away from your parent, which planted the seeds of the belief that your needs are inherently selfish or harmful to others. This role inversion meant that you never learned how to be cared for, only how to care, creating a profound loneliness that stays with you even when you are surrounded by people who claim to love you. The weight of this responsibility felt like a physical burden, a constant tension in your shoulders as you waited for the next crisis you would be expected to solve. You weren't allowed to be a child who made mistakes or had bad days, because the adults in your life were too busy being children themselves, demanding that you provide the maturity they lacked. This forced maturity is often praised by the outside world as being a good or easy child, but inside, it was the sound of a young heart closing off its own needs just to survive the night. This survival response is what we call hypervigilance, a state where your brain is constantly scanning for threats and trying to predict the needs of others before they even voice them. In clinical terms, this is a trauma response, but in the language of your heart, it is simply the way you learned to stay safe in an environment that felt emotionally unsafe. You became so attuned to others that you lost the ability to hear your own inner voice, replacing your genuine self with a highly calibrated version of what you thought everyone else wanted you to be. Parentification isn't just a role you played. It became the very lens through which you see the world, leading you to believe that you are only safe when you are useful. You might find yourself apologizing for things that aren't your fault, or feeling a wave of panic when someone is upset, even if it has nothing to do with you, because your brain still thinks you are the one who has to fix it. Understanding this mechanism is the first step toward realizing that your constant yes is not a sign of true kindness, but a lingering echo of a child who was never allowed to say no. This hyper-attunement allowed you to survive, but it also meant that you had to sacrifice your authenticity to maintain your attachments, a trade-off that no child should ever have to make. You learned to navigate the world by anticipating the desires of others, which made you incredibly perceptive but also deeply disconnected from your own physical and emotional sensations. Healing begins when you realize that this hypervigilance is a tool from your past that you no longer need to carry into your future, allowing you to finally put down the shield you have held for so long. Over time, this need to please others leads to the formation of a performer identity, a mask you wear so convincingly that even you begin to forget who is underneath it. You became the person who is always okay, the one who never needs help, and the one who can handle anything. All while your true self was slowly disappearing into the shadows of your own life. This masking was a brilliant strategy for avoiding conflict and securing whatever crumbs of affection were available. But it left you feeling like an actor in your own story, playing a role that grows more exhausting with every passing year. The self-disappearance that occurs in narcissistic family systems is a quiet tragedy, where your unique personality, dreams, and boundaries are systematically traded for the approval of a parent who could never be satisfied. You learned that being yourself was risky, so you built a persona that was helpful, compliant, and invisible whenever necessary, ensuring that you never drew the wrong kind of attention. This performer identity is what people see and praise, but it feels like a hollow shell because it was built on the ruins of your lost childhood and the suppression of your genuine spirit. Breaking free from this mask requires a terrifying honesty, because it means acknowledging that the person everyone loves might just be a character you created to stay alive. You might feel like a fraud when you try to be authentic, fearing that if people saw the real, messy, and boundaried version of you, they would leave just like your parent threatened to do. But this performative kindness is a prison, and the only way out is to start honoring the parts of yourself that you were told to hide, even if it feels like you are breaking a lifelong promise to stay small. I want to take a moment to speak directly to you, the one who has spent a lifetime taking care of everyone else while your own heart remained unheard and unseen. Does it feel like saying no is a betrayal to the people you love, even when you are completely exhausted and have nothing left to give? If this resonates with you, please know that you are not alone, and your struggle is a natural response to what you have been through. I invite you to share your heart in the comments by simply writing, "I am learning to choose myself," as a way to honor your own journey and show others that it is okay to put yourself first. Sharing your experience here creates a safe space for all of us to feel a little less lonely in our healing, and your voice might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today to feel brave enough to set their first boundary. As you look back at that child you once were, you might begin to feel the silent wound of the inner child who is still waiting for the permission to exist without being productive. This part of you still carries the unmet needs for protection, validation, and unconditional love that were sacrificed on the altar of your parents' ego. Even as a high-functioning adult, that inner child is often the one driving your fear of conflict, desperately trying to avoid the rejection that once felt like a life-or-death situation in your early years. The inner child doesn't care about your adult accomplishments or your career success. They are still looking for the safety that was missing in a home where love was conditional and boundaries were seen as attacks. You might feel this child in the sudden lump in your throat when someone raises their voice, or the overwhelming guilt you feel when you take a day off just to rest. These are not signs of weakness, but the cries of a part of you that was never allowed to just be a child, and who is now asking you to finally step in and be the protector they never had. Healing this wound requires you to sit with the grief of what you didn't get, and to acknowledge that you were a victim of a system that demanded you give up your soul to keep the family afloat. It is about recognizing that your inner child's fear of saying no is a memory of a time when saying no really did have consequences, but that you are now an adult who has the power to create safety. By listening to this silent wound, you can begin to offer yourself the compassion that was withheld from you, slowly teaching your nervous system that it is finally safe to stop performing and start living. In your adult life, these patterns manifest as a profound difficulty in trusting your own judgment and a chronic tendency to over-explain your decisions to everyone around you. You might find yourself in relationships where you are again the over-functioning partner, attracting people who take more than they give because that dynamic feels familiar and comfortable to your survival brain. Your self-worth becomes a moving target, constantly dependent on how much you have done for others today, leaving you in a state of perpetual burnout where rest feels like a guilty secret rather than a basic human necessity. The struggle with emotional regulation often stems from a lifetime of suppressing your feelings to avoid upsetting others, leading to sudden outbursts of anger or deep periods of shutdown when the pressure becomes too much. You have been trained to be an emotional sponge, soaking up the stress of the people around you while having no outlet for your own, which makes you feel heavy and disconnected from your own joy. Trusting others feels like a gamble because you were taught that the people closest to you are the ones most likely to ignore your boundaries or use your vulnerability against you. Breaking these adult manifestations requires a conscious effort to stop the cycle of self-neglect and to realize that your kindness has often been a form of self-abandonment used to maintain a false sense of security. You have to learn the language of your own needs, which might feel like learning a foreign tongue after decades of speaking only the language of others' expectations. It means tolerating the discomfort of other people's disappointment and realizing that if a relationship requires you to disappear to function, it is not a relationship worth keeping in its current form. Biologically, your brain was wired for attachment, because for a human child, connection to a caregiver is as essential as food and water, even if that caregiver is harmful. You were forced to choose between being authentic to yourself or staying attached to the person you needed for survival. And like every child, you chose attachment every single time. This biological necessity meant that you had to sacrifice your own truth and your own boundaries, because asserting them would have risked the very connection that kept you alive in your early years. This sacrifice of authenticity creates a deep internal split where you feel like you are living a lie, even when you are doing everything right by society's standards. Your instinctual need for belonging was weaponized by a narcissistic parent, teaching you that love is something you earn through compliance rather than something you deserve simply by existing. Even now, your body might react with physical symptoms like a racing heart or a tight chest when you think about setting a boundary, because your primitive brain still thinks you are risking your survival by speaking your truth. Understanding that your people-pleasing is a biological survival strategy helps to remove the shame that often accompanies these behaviors, allowing you to see them as adaptations rather than character flaws. You are not weak for finding it hard to say no. You are a survivor of an environment where saying no was a genuine risk to your emotional and physical safety. Reclaiming your authenticity is the process of teaching your body that the danger has passed and that it is finally safe to prioritize your own integrity over the comfort of people who refuse to respect your limits. The deep consequences of this upbringing often show up as a persistent internal narrative that tells you that you are fundamentally flawed or that you are responsible for everyone's emotional state. This internal critic is usually just the voice of your parent that has been moved inside your own head, continuing the work of keeping you small and compliant long after you have left their home. You might find yourself trapped in coping styles that alternate between total isolation to avoid the demands of others and intense over-involvement where you lose yourself in someone else's problems. Relational effects include a fear of intimacy because being seen feels like being exposed, and you worry that if someone truly knew you, they would find you as burdensome as your parent made you feel. You might struggle with chronic indecision because you were never allowed to develop a sense of what you actually want, always looking to others for permission or direction before taking a step. These consequences are deep and pervasive, affecting your career, your friendships, and your physical health, as the body often keeps the score of years of suppressed emotion and chronic stress. Facing these long-term effects can feel overwhelming, but it is also the path to true liberation as you begin to see that these patterns are not who you are, but what happened to you. You can start to challenge the internal narrative by treating yourself with the same gentleness you have always extended to others, slowly replacing the critic's voice with one of self-advocacy. The goal is not to erase the past, but to integrate it so that it no longer dictates your future, allowing you to build a life based on your own values rather than the legacy of your survival. The first real step toward healing is the process of awareness and witnessing, where you begin to look at your life and your history with honest, unblinking eyes. This means breaking the habit of self-gaslighting where you minimize your own pain by telling yourself it wasn't that bad or that other people had it worse, and instead validating your own lived experience. Witnessing is about becoming the compassionate observer of your own story, acknowledging the moments where you were hurt and the ways you had to twist yourself into shapes that didn't fit, just to be loved. By breaking the silence and the denial that often protects narcissistic family systems, you start to reclaim your own reality from the distorted version your parent forced upon you. You begin to see the patterns of manipulation and emotional neglect for what they were, rather than accepting them as your fault or as a normal part of life. This shift in perspective is often painful because it involves grieving the parent you deserved but never had, but it is the only way to clear the ground for a new and healthier identity to grow. Witnessing also involves paying attention to how your body feels in the present moment, noticing the no that shows up as tension in your stomach, even when your mouth is saying yes. It is the practice of stopping the automatic response to please, and instead asking yourself what you actually feel and what you actually need in this moment. This awareness acts like a light in a dark room, making it impossible to go back to the old way of living once you have seen the truth of how much your self-abandonment has cost you over the years. As you continue on this path, I want to invite you to stay connected with this community of healing by subscribing to this channel, where we explore these deep emotional waters together with grace and understanding. This journey can feel incredibly lonely, but by joining us, you are surrounding yourself with people who truly understand what it means to rebuild a life from the ground up after narcissistic wounding. Subscribing is a small but powerful way to remind yourself that you deserve support and that your healing matters, providing you with regular insights and encouragement to keep moving forward toward the person you were always meant to be. Our goal is to provide a safe harbor for your heart, offering guidance and validation as you learn to navigate the complexities of your past and the possibilities of your future, ensuring that you never have to walk this road alone. Even after you gain awareness, you might still struggle with the high-functioning adult wound, where you appear successful and put together on the outside, while feeling like a fragile child on the inside. You might be the person everyone leans on, the high achiever at work, or the friend who always has the answers. But this success is often fueled by a desperate need to prove your worth and avoid the shame of failure. This chronic responsibility is a heavy burden that leads to a secret life of emotional suppression, where you never feel like you can truly let your guard down or show any sign of struggle. The high-functioning adult is often just the good child grown up, still using achievement as a way to negotiate for safety and approval in a world that feels inherently demanding. You might find that you cannot relax even on vacation, or that you feel a sense of impending doom whenever things are going too well, as if you are waiting for the other shoe to drop. This survival pattern is exhausting because it requires a constant output of energy to maintain the facade of being okay, leaving very little room for genuine rest or spontaneous joy. Healing this wound involves learning that your value is not tied to your productivity, and that you are allowed to be messy without losing the love and respect of those around you. It means intentionally slowing down and allowing yourself to be mediocre or to fail at things, proving to your nervous system that the world won't end if you aren't perfect. By stepping down from the pedestal of the high achiever, you can finally find the ground beneath your feet and begin to build a life that is sustainable, authentic, and truly your own. This legacy of narcissistic parenting shows up in the way you hold your breath when someone enters the room, or the way you subconsciously seek permission for even the smallest personal choices. You might notice that you are always looking for the right answer that will please the most people, rather than asking what is right for you, a habit born from years of having your own choices criticized or ignored. Recognition of this legacy is not about blaming yourself, but about seeing the deep grooves that your upbringing has carved into your psyche and your daily habits. The permission-seeking behavior is a direct result of being raised by someone who viewed your independence as a threat to their control, making you feel that you are not the authority of your own life. Even as a grown adult with your own home and career, you might still feel like you are waiting for a green light from an invisible judge before you allow yourself to buy something you want or change your hair. These tiny moments of hesitation are the echoes of a child who had to check the emotional weather before they were allowed to have an opinion or a desire. Breaking this legacy requires you to consciously practice making choices without seeking validation, starting with small things, and gradually working up to the bigger decisions of your life. It means noticing when you are holding your breath and intentionally letting it out, signaling to your body that you are in a safe space where you are the one in charge. As you reclaim these small territories of your own life, you begin to dismantle the structure of the narcissistic legacy, replacing the need for external permission with a growing sense of internal trust and personal power. The process of reparenting is where you consciously step into the role of the loving, supportive parent for your own inner child, giving them the validation and protection they were denied. You start by talking to that vulnerable part of yourself with the kindness you would offer a dear friend, acknowledging their fears and promising that you will never leave them or force them to disappear again. This isn't just an intellectual exercise. It is a deep emotional practice of showing up for yourself in the moments when you feel most small, proving through your actions that you are now a safe person for yourself to be around. Reparenting means setting boundaries not just with others, but with your own internal critic, refusing to allow the old voices of shame to dominate your internal dialogue. It involves celebrating your own progress, no matter how small, and providing the consistent, predictable care that creates a sense of internal security you never had. When you feel the urge to overgive or to stay silent to keep the peace, the parent part of you steps in to say, "I see you are scared, but you don't have to do this anymore. I am here and we are going to be okay." By giving yourself what you didn't receive, whether it was structure, praise, or simply the right to be a child, you begin to fill the empty spaces left by your upbringing. This work creates a foundation of self-love that is not dependent on anyone else's opinion, allowing you to finally feel grounded in your own skin. It is the most profound act of rebellion against a narcissistic past to become the person who finally loves and accepts you exactly as you are, without any conditions or requirements for performance. Shadow work involves turning toward the parts of your experience that are painful, ugly, or filled with grief, rather than trying to stay positive or move on before you are ready. It is about sitting with the anger you were never allowed to express, the resentment of the years you lost to caretaking, and the deep sadness of knowing your parent couldn't love you the way you needed. This work is not about dwelling in the past, but about clearing the emotional backlog that has been stored in your body, allowing the energy of those suppressed feelings to finally move through you. Turning toward your pain with honesty means admitting that you were hurt, even if you were told you were being sensitive, and allowing yourself to feel the full weight of that hurt without judgment. Grief is a necessary part of this process because you are mourning the loss of the childhood you never had and the version of yourself that had to die so the performer could live. This honesty is a form of light that dissolves the power of the shadow, making it possible to integrate these difficult emotions into a more complete and resilient sense of self. As you sit with your grief, you might find that underneath the pain is a reservoir of strength and a clarity that was previously hidden by your need to please. Shadow work allows you to reclaim your anger as a boundary-setting tool and your sadness as a way to connect with your own humanity, turning what was once a source of shame into a source of power. By embracing the whole of your experience, the dark and the light, you become a more integrated person who no longer has to fear their own internal world. In your adulthood relationships, these patterns often show up as a knight in shining armor complex, where you try to save people who are as broken as your parents were, or a complete avoidance of conflict that leaves you feeling resentful and unheard. You might find yourself saying yes to a social event when you are physically ill, or staying in a job that drains you because you are afraid to disappoint your boss. These concrete examples are the real-world battlegrounds where you practice your new skills of boundary setting and self-advocacy, testing your growing strength in the fire of daily life. You might notice that you attract partners who are emotionally unavailable, forcing you to repeat the childhood cycle of chasing after love and proving your worth through service. Or perhaps you are the one who stays distant, fearing that if you let someone close, they will inevitably demand the same self-sacrifice your parents did. Recognizing these relational scripts is essential because it allows you to stop reacting from your past and start choosing connections based on mutual respect and shared vulnerability rather than old survival needs. Every time you choose to state a preference, express a need, or say a firm but kind no, you are rewriting your relational history and building a new way of being in the world. It will feel clunky and terrifying at first, like learning to walk on a limb that has been in a cast for years, but with each small act of courage, the muscle of your selfhood grows stronger. Your relationships will change. Some may even end, but the ones that remain will be based on the real you, providing a level of connection and safety you never thought possible. To truly understand what was missing, you must ask yourself what that inner child really needed in the moments of their deepest loneliness and fear. Did they need to be told that their feelings were valid, that they were not responsible for their parents' happiness, or simply that they were safe to just be? Exploring these foundational emotional needs helps you to identify the specific gaps in your upbringing, giving you a roadmap for what you need to provide for yourself today. Often, the core need was for unconditional belonging, a sense that you were loved not for what you did, but for who you were, regardless of your mood or your achievements. You might find that you also needed protection from the emotional storms of your home, or the freedom to make mistakes without being shamed or punished. By identifying these unmet needs, you can stop looking for others to fill them and instead become the primary source of your own validation and security. Ask yourself, if I could go back and tell that child one thing, what would it be? Most likely, it would be something like, "It's not your fault," or "You are enough exactly as you are." And these are the truths you must now weave into the fabric of your adult life. These questions are the keys to your transformation, unlocking the doors to a version of yourself that is no longer searching for external permission to exist, but is instead rooted in a deep and unwavering self-acceptance. As you begin to prioritize your own needs, new patterns emerge. A sense of safety that comes from within, clear boundaries that protect your energy, and a growing authenticity that feels like coming home. You start to realize that saying no is not an act of cruelty, but an act of integrity that honors both yourself and the person you are speaking to by being honest about your limits. This transformation is not a destination, but a continuous process of choosing yourself over and over again, until it becomes your natural way of moving through the world. Safety no longer feels like something you have to earn through perfection, but something you carry with you because you know you have your own back and will not abandon yourself when things get difficult. Your boundaries become the healthy walls of your life, allowing you to let in the people and experiences that nourish you, while keeping out the ones that drain or harm you. Authenticity starts to feel less like a risk and more like a relief, as you realize that the right people will love you more for your truth than they ever did for your performance. This new way of being allows you to experience a level of peace and spontaneity that was impossible when you were constantly scanning for threats and managing others' emotions. You find that you have more energy for your own dreams and a greater capacity for genuine connection, because you are no longer operating from a place of depletion and fear. This is the reward for the hard work of healing, a life where you are the author of your own story, guided by your own light rather than the shadows of your past. In this journey, it is helpful to remember that healing is not about becoming a new person, but about reclaiming the identity that was always there, hidden under the layers of survival. As many wisdom traditions suggest, the path to wholivity is often a process of unlearning the lies we were told about ourselves until only the truth remains. You are not a project to be fixed or a problem to be solved. You are a human being who is finally allowed to inhabit the full range of your existence, from your greatest strengths to your deepest vulnerabilities. This consciousness of your own worth is a quiet but revolutionary force that changes how you interact with every person and every situation you encounter. It is the realization that your existence is its own justification, and that you do not need to prove your right to be here through constant service or self-sacrifice. This shift in awareness is the cornerstone of a healthy life, providing the steady ground upon which you can build a future that is defined by freedom, joy, and a deep sense of purpose. When you look at your life through this lens of reclaimed identity, the past no longer feels like a life sentence but like a rigorous training ground that has given you unique insights and a profound capacity for empathy. You are learning to use the sensitivity that was once a survival tool as a gift for connection, choosing when to open your heart and when to protect it. This is the essence of consciousness, the ability to live with intention rather than reacting from old wounds, creating a life that is a true reflection of your soul. Healing is the process of reclaiming your identity, not becoming someone entirely new, but returning to the person you were before the world told you who you had to be. It is a slow integration of all your parts: the child who was scared, the performer who was tired, and the adult who is now learning to lead with love and boundaries. You are not fixed when you stop feeling the pain, but when the pain no longer has the power to make you abandon yourself or your truth. This redefinition of healing allows for the fact that you will still have bad days and that old triggers will still occasionally surface, but you will have a different relationship to them. Instead of falling back into shame, you will meet those moments with the compassion of a reparented soul, knowing exactly how to care for yourself until the storm passes. You are becoming whole, which means accepting the cracks and the scars as part of a beautiful, complex mosaic that is uniquely yours. Integration is the final step where you bridge the gap between your past and your present, honoring the survivor you were while fully inhabiting the empowered person you are becoming. You can look at the child you were with deep gratitude for their strength and ingenuity, while gently telling them that their job is finally over and they can now rest. This wholeness is a state of being where you are no longer at war with yourself, but are instead your own most trusted ally and your own most reliable source of love. As we bring this reflection to a close, take a deep breath and feel the space you have created for yourself today by simply choosing to look at your truth. Becoming whole is a quiet revolution, a series of small, brave choices to stay connected to your own heart, even when the world, or your history, pulls you away. You are reconnecting with that inner child now, not as a victim, but as a guardian who can finally offer the safety, the permission, and the unconditional acceptance that was always your birthright. The road to healing is not always easy, but it is the most worthy journey you will ever take because it leads you back to the only person who can truly set you free: yourself. You have carried the weight of others' worlds for far too long, and it is finally time to put that burden down and walk into your own life, with your head held high and your heart wide open. Believe in your capacity to change, trust in the wisdom of your own healing, and know that you are becoming more yourself with every boundary you set and every no that honors your soul. You are not cruel for having limits. You are finally, beautifully, and powerfully whole. Would you like me to develop a script for another topic within this niche, such as the struggle with chronic guilt or the process of setting boundaries with a narcissistic parent?